We like to think of the Jedi as the keepers of peace and justice in that galaxy far, far away that we keep hearing about. But are they really that? After seeing how supernatural or psi powers have been thought about in other franchises, I've come to the conclusion that the Jedi are actually pretty shady, and I've got the clips to prove it. Stay with me as we discuss the Psi Corps, the Jedi, and psi ethics across the various science fiction franchises. Hi, I'm Chris, your host here at Sci-Fi Eyes, where I highlight and comment on tropes in science fiction and fantasy. In this episode, I want to look at psi powers and how various franchises treat them. The franchise that got me thinking about this is Babylon 5. Babylon 5 was a 5-season series about the Shadow War. In the B5 universe, human telepaths are required to join an organization known as the Psi Corps. The story is that the Corps provides training and support for telepaths, but it's not all roses. There's a scene near the beginning of the series where Commander Susan Ivanova, seen here with commercial telepath Talia Winters, explains her extreme antipathy towards the Corps. Her mother was discovered to be a telepath later in life. Ivanova explains, when they discover what you are, they give you 3 choices. You can either join the Psi Corps, or go to prison, or agree to take certain drugs for the rest of your life. Drugs that inhibit your telepathic abilities. Talia adds, that's the law. Unregistered telepaths have to be controlled in order to protect the privacy of others. In the B5 universe, telepaths are restricted in what they can do. Over time, it is revealed that they can't just randomly read anyone's mind without permission or court orders. In the pilot, we see Commander Sheridan here giving another commercial telepath, Lita Alexander, a tour of the Babylon 5 station, where we find out, as he reminds her, that the casino is off limits to her. The Corps ostensibly exists to protect normals and train telepaths, but it's not without its own problems. Not everyone wants to join the Corps. Ivanova's mother was just one example. Ivanova tells the tragic story about how her mother chose to take the sleepers. That's the drugs that neutralize telepathic ability. Ivanova's mother was affected so badly by the sleepers that she took her own life. In one episode, Talia tells the story of being taken from her parents at the age of 5 to be trained by the Corps. They have a saying, the Corps is mother, the Corps is father. In another episode, we get to see inside an underground railroad that helps telepaths escape the Corps by smuggling them to planets on the frontiers of known space, outside the reach of the Psi Corps. In that episode, a psychop named Alfred Bester, played by Star Trek alum Walter Koenig, comes to the station with the mission to eliminate the escape route. The writers for the B5 universe seem to have given some serious thought to what might arise if telepathic powers really did exist. That brings me to the Jedi. Force powers seem to work very much like other psi powers. There's a limited form of empathy, some prescience, a sort of hypnotic suggestion ability, and some very powerful telekinetic abilities. So it seems very appropriate to include them in this discussion. Keeping in mind what we've just covered about the Psi Corps, let's take a look at some Jedi action during the time of the Republic. Note that during this time, the Jedi Temple still exists, and there are a number of Jedi around, so this isn't just some one-off kind of thing. The first thing I want to point out is Qui-Gon Jinn trying to rip off Watto in The Phantom Menace. Watto's a business owner on Tatooine who sells used starship components. Since he's still around in Attack of the Clones, after Anakin has grown up, we can assume he's at least moderately successful and knows his business. What we see in the first encounter in Phantom Menace is that Qui-Gon tries to convince Watto to accept Republic credits for the needed parts. Watto explains that Republic credits aren't worth anything out here on the Rim, and Qui-Gon tries to use the Jedi mind trick to overcome this. Now, whatever you may think of Watto, Qui-Gon is clearly trying to rip him off by effectively obtaining the parts for nothing, by using currency that is worthless on Tatooine. That doesn't seem like justice, but more like acting from the belief that the ends justify the means. Qui-Gon fails to convince Watto to take the credits. I would love to hear in the comments what you think of this situation. What if Qui-Gon had convinced him? Do you think that's okay? Later, once Qui-Gon has figured out that Annie is a Force sensitive, he comments to Annie's mother Shmi, had he been born in the Republic, we would have identified him early. ... You know, when I heard that, I had the thought, and done what? Would the Jedi Order have taken Anakin away involuntarily, like the Psi Corps does? What do you think of that idea? The question went unanswered for a long time, and was finally answered in an episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi, where Obi-Wan tells young Leia that he doesn't remember his family because he was indeed taken from them at a young age. Is this the kind of thing we expect from the Jedi Order? Do you think they're nice folks for separating families like this? In the lead up to the big pod race in Phantom Menace, we also get to see Qui-Gon cheat at gambling by using his telekinetic abilities. Watto suggests they use a chance cube to determine which of Anakin or Shmi will be released to Qui-Gon. And Qui-Gon uses his force powers to affect the outcome of the die roll. Again, do the ends justify the means? We can also say that Anakin is also cheating at pod racing because he's relying on his force sense to win. In Attack of the Clones, when Anakin and Obi-Wan capture Zam Wesell, that's the shape-shifting bounty hunter that tried to assassinate Padme, it sure looks like Anakin is trying to use the mind trick to compel Wesell to tell them who hired Wesell for the job. I was noting that after the scene in the club, there's no law enforcement, just the Jedi, and hence no due process. What's going on here? Did the Jedi have unlimited discretion in how they act? I can see why the Jedi might want to make sure that Force-sensitive join the Jedi Order. Who wants a random wild talent out there doing who knows what? It was for this reason that I was extremely surprised in Book of Boba Fett that Luke offered Grogu the choice of training or returning to the Mandalorian, represented here by the choice of a lightsaber or the mithril coat. I mean the Beskar coat. It was already clear from episodes of The Mandalorian that Grogu has some talents and knows how to use them, even without formal training. Who knows what else he might learn to do, or even if he might encounter some Sith who would offer him other training. Of course, at this point in time, Luke is on his own without the backing of the Jedi Order, so we can't draw any firm conclusions here. But it seemed to me that Luke would want to do his best to get Grogu to train with him rather than turn him loose. Seeing these examples, it seems to me that the Jedi seem to do as they please, which concerns me. They might not be such squeaky clean good guys after all. I wondered if any other franchises had thought about these issues any further. I turned to the Star Trek franchises to see what could be found, since their episodic nature means there's more latitude for per-episode experimentation with different ideas. What I found is equally alarming, especially in the context of the Federation, which claims to be all about self-determination and individual rights. Let's take a look. My first example comes from Elaan of Troyius. Here, Crichton, from Elas, is suspected of having sabotaged the Enterprise's engines. Kirk doesn't hesitate to get on the intercom and call Spock, "I'll need you for the Vulcan mind meld." Crichton, suspecting he won't be able to resist that, kills himself. Since this is the Federation, I started to wonder about due process again. Does Crichton have any rights? Or do we justify this proposed action on the basis that he's an enemy agent and we need the information so anything goes? I would hope that as time passed in the real world, the writers would have had more time to think about these things and possibly evolve their position on this. But if we jump ahead to the Undiscovered Country, we see another instance of the exact same behavior. Here, Valeris is suspected of being involved with the coup plot. Again, Kirk doesn't hesitate to call Spock to take the information from her. So again, questions of due process come up. And this time, we're talking about a fellow Starfleet officer. Does that not confer any rights? Jumping into Next Generation, in the first season episode, Home Soil, we get to see Troy being a little sneak, tattling on what is going on with anyone that Picard or Riker talk to. The Enterprise has been sent to check in on a terraforming operation, and as Picard talks with the project lead to arrange a visit, Troy keeps whispering to Picard about the lead's state of mind. He's growing alarmed. I sense deliberate concealment, and so on throughout the conversation. Troy joins the away team and continues with this kibitzing on the surface, making side comments to Riker about what she's sensing from the terraforming team members. I found the effect horrific. How would you feel about other people having a running commentary on your state of mind without your knowledge? Right? Drop in a comment on that. In any case, I'm glad the writers didn't carry on with this behavior on her part. It probably wouldn't have allowed for very good storytelling, since the away team would always know what's going on all the time. There'd be no mysteries to solve. Much later in the series, it's clear that Deanna is still doing this all the time, even if she's not doing it out loud. This was brought home for me in the Next Gen episode, The Loss, where Deanna loses her empathic powers, and in one panicked briefing room scene, she's describing how she can't feel anyone in the room. It's noticeable because she's accustomed to feeling everyone all the time. Notice that she does it all the time, unconsciously, just like ordinary hearing. Now, keeping that in mind, here, in the Outcast, Deanna is playing poker with the bridge crew. How could she not feel if someone is bluffing? Other than Data, right? Why are they even letting her play? Have they been sucked in like us and aren't really thinking through what's going on for her? What do you think? There are some other episodes where we get some impressive displays of Betazoid abilities. For example, here in Manhunt, after just walking into the transporter room, Deanna's mother, Loxana Troi, declares that the Antidian delegates waiting to transport down to a conference are carrying explosives intended to destroy the conference. In another example, this one from Tin Man, Betazoid Tam Elbrun, who has been brought along to make telepathic contact with a new life form, snaps back at Will Riker's unspoken thoughts about a previous failed mission that Elbrun is blamed for. It's clear that he's responding to Will's unspoken thoughts. With this kind of ability easily found within the Federation, I'm surprised that no one has thought about security issues, such as telepaths like these just lifting all kinds of classified information or passwords from Starfleet officers. Isn't anyone concerned about that? I only found 2 episodes where the topic of psi ethics were brought up in the Trek franchises. In the Next Generation episode Violations, a delegation of Ulians visit the Enterprise. These aliens specialize in telepathic memory retrieval. Here, we see Keiko O'Brien volunteer for a demo where she revisits a childhood memory. Over the course of the episode, we discover that Jev, one of the Ulian delegation, is entering people's memories without consent. In this particular form of telepathy, the practitioner seems to get inserted into the memory, and it can seem somewhat horrifying. Even the group's leader, Tarmin, here, calls it a form of rape. However, when asked if they would like to prosecute, Picard says, "I'm not sure we have any legal basis for such a prosecution. Memory invasion is simply not a crime we've ever had to contend with." That's a bit of a surprising statement, since we've seen the previous examples where memories have been taken without permission. Apparently we overlooked these incursions since they all worked out for the good guys. There is one serious take on this topic in the Next Generation episode The Price, which is a really good episode. Here, negotiator Devanani Ral has kept secret that he has empathic abilities from being part Betazoid. He uses his abilities to manipulate people at the negotiating table. Ral gets involved with Troi and reveals his secret to her, asking that she keep it to herself. After manipulating the other negotiators, she calls him out on it, and they do talk about the ethics of it. Because Deanna doesn't announce her abilities to every new alien they meet, but does warn Picard if they're up to no good, just as we saw in Home Soil, Ral accuses Deanna of doing the same thing that he does. She argues that because it's for protection, that it's legitimate, but he tears that down. To me, this does seem like the Jedi's, we're the good guys, so we can do anything kind of argument. Deanna eventually reveals Ral's secret to the negotiators and describes how Ral has manipulated the proceedings. This episode is worth watching for its treatment of this topic. It's not definitive, but at least it does try to handle the topic, although it's not really satisfying in terms of revealing any solution to how to handle these abilities. So I've shown you some examples of how psi powers have been used in various franchises, along with some questions about how they should be viewed. These powers seem to be a convenient story element that gets used incidentally, but to great effect. The issues around this do seem tricky, and I'm not really sure myself what I would want. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think individuals with paranormal abilities need to be limited or controlled in some way, such as the Psi Corps paradigm? Would you be concerned about people reading your mind without your permission? How do you think you would feel if you were one of those individuals and were subject to such limitations? Are there other franchises, novels, movies, or shows that have a more thoughtful take on this? Tell me about it in the comments below. That's all I had for this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, please remember to like and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next time.